My name is Lance Conrad, and I'm an author. I write books for a living. I went from crawling to sprinting. Now I could run through not just one world, but many. Live not just one life, but hundreds.
He wants to marry her. He'll have to come to Tetron.
And how about a nice spoiled cousin who bullies him all the time, right? What if these two characters fell in love? What if these two characters fought to the death? Show me him standing up against an entire army single-handed. And drove most of the race before hopping out to run the last one. That's a little bit different. True story, by the way. Somebody went on a trip or somebody came into town. There's your plots. They took that big old forehead and just crashed every brick, board, and brother in the house. Let me tell you a story.
Hello everyone and welcome to Story Stream. I'm here with Mike Forsyth. And today we are talking about shamans, saints, and sages. We're going to be looking at major religious figures throughout the history of the world. Now, because it is religion, I do want to take a moment to say we mean no disrespect to any religion in the world. We're just here for the stories. And as long as I'm there, though, where this channel was originally built to teach words, there are three words that I feel even native English speakers don't differentiate very well. So I'd like to take just a moment and kind of go through those. And that is belief, faith, and religion. Okay? Because you have belief, that is just something, I think that one is the kind of the base, something you believe, right? I believe this book is right here. And what you believe is based on what evidences you accept. Simple enough. What would you?
Yeah, absolutely.
And yeah, some evidences are more objective and some are more subjective, but it's just whatever you accept, right? We live in a world where there are flat earthers, right? Clearly, people can believe whatever just based on whatever evidences they choose to accept. So that's just belief, right? That's kind of the base, the core. Whether you believe in, some religion or science or whatever, like all those, just whatever evidences you accept. The next one is faith. That is belief with an action, right? I believe that Australia exists. Absolutely believe it, 100%. Okay, I've accepted those evidences. It has changed nothing in my life at all. I have not made one decision differently because of my belief in the existence of Australia. Faith is when you believe in something and actually do it, right? I turn the key to my car because I have faith that it is going to start, right? I believe that if I did more push-ups, I'd be in better shape. I don't have faith because I don't do it, right? So faith is belief with that action, right? Faith is where something actually happens. That is why when we talk about the history of religion, it really is a story of faith, because faith with that action component is power. And let's be honest, in all of history, we see power corrupts.
Yes.
At times. And yeah, faith, just like money or military might, is a form of power. And then we have religion. Religion is a system of beliefs, right? It's a whole package. Here are the stories, the rituals, the choices, the consequences. And yeah, you've got this whole system of beliefs that people kind of take the whole thing, right? All right, I like it. I'll take all of it. And then how much faith they put into that, we'll see. Not everyone who ascribes to a certain religion actually has faith in that religion because they don't always act according to the teachings. So yeah, I feel like that is very important to bring up the difference between belief, faith, and religion. We will likely use all three words tonight. And yeah, I feel it's important for people to understand the differentiation between those three words.
Okay, there's one more word that unfortunately, since we're talking about religion, we need to bring up right now, and that is bigotry.
That's a word.
Unfortunately, in our world, that is a word that's going to come up right away. Bigotry, because this did come from a vocabulary show. A bigot is someone who shows an unreasonable hatred and ignorant attitude towards an ethnic group, a race, or a religion. Tonight we're going to talk about religious figures. By necessity, we're going to be addressing topics, subjects that are sensitive. But we want to assure you that even though these come from religious traditions that are not our own, from cultures that are not necessarily our own, even though we will find some of these stories unusual, to say the least, or even humorous, we want to express that we have only the greatest respect for the people that follow these religions, that follow these faiths. We acknowledge that people of intelligence and sincerity and goodwill have followed all religious traditions and belief systems and faiths throughout time, and we have nothing but respect for that.
Yes. Though no respect for bigots. There is
Exactly.
And bigots, I will be abundantly clear, bigots happen both inside and outside of religions. Bigotry is more of a personal thing. No one has a monopoly on that. But let's just jump in.
Yes, please.
All right. In the beginning, we have this, like that classical piece, right? The dun, 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 dun. Do you know the name of that piece?
I do. That would be Also Sprach Zarathustra.
Yes, or in English, Thus Spake Zarathustra. Now, Zarathustra is actually the first person we are going to bring up, or also known as Zoroaster, or Zoroaster. All right, he was the founder of the Zoroastrian religion. Though in his own tongue, it would have been closer to the Zarathustra. The Zoroaster is Greek, right? We do run into, with religions, they span sometimes thousands of years, and so the names get a little bit tricky. I think one of the classic examples, right, is very well known, of course, is the Christian religion, right? You have Jesus. In his own tongue would have been closer to Yeshua.
So Joshua.
Yeah, Joshua.
Okay.
But yeah, as these words move through different language systems, things get twisted a little bit. And we're actually going to run into one of those with Zarathustra, right?
Okay.
So he is a priest at a time when there is a polytheistic. We're going to have a lot of cool words. Polytheistic means they worship multiple gods, right? It's often shamanistic, right? Where you have people who commune with the spirits and have little rituals and everything like that.
Now, you say a time. Can you give me a broad strokes? When are we?
I wish I could, Mike.
Oh, boy.
This is one of those things. What we have for Zarathustra is a 900-year range. He was born sometime between 1500 BC and 600 BC.
Okay.
Somewhere back there.
Can you give me a where?
Persia.
Okay.
All right. Okay, so we're there, kind of like Babylon, that kind of area.
Modern day Iran.
Yes, modern day Iran, absolutely. So he's there in Persia, and we have this polytheistic religion, and polytheism was pretty much over all the world at that point, depending on how finely you want to slice that, right? And it is believed by some that Zoroaster started Zarathustra, the first monotheistic religion, right? Because he's a priest in this polytheistic religion. And he says, guys, there's only one. There's only one God, and all these spirits are evil demons.
It's a bold stance.
Yes, he was immensely popular, and everyone. No. That's not how that went. He was driven out almost immediately by threat of death. But he manages to meet this other king who listens to him, and once the king joins the religion, the whole country joins the religion.
Okay.
Right? So that is his great in. Now, a few things. So the basic idea is there is good, right? Ahura Mazda, that's their god, their deity. He is good. Everything else is bad. And we have the symbol of Ahura Mazda that is fire. In fact, their places of worship are fire temples.
Okay.
Which I just think more places should have fire temples. That is metal right there.
And what goes on in a fire temple?
There is the main thing is that there is a fire. And most of them are eternal flames, right? They're kept running all the time, no matter what. And people come there and, do different ordinances or rituals. It isn't very centralized, so there is some variation. Okay. And there's not really much. There's only about 200,000 Zoroastrians left today.
Today. So very old religion.
I said some would
Still
argue
going on
the
today.
oldest monotheistic religion. Now, it is worth noting that Judaism was even older, but again, depending on who you believe, was not always monotheistic, and that it became monotheistic after Zoroastrianism.
Interesting.
Right?
Okay.
There were several religions, for instance, that had there are multiple gods, but only one worth worshiping, right? There's only one main one, but there's all these others. There is some history of Judaism that kind of led towards monotheistic, but I said, where we have a 900-year range of when this guy was even born, and most of the stuff written about him was written around 1000 AD. So most of the stuff written about him is almost 1,500 years later. Our knowledge here is real shaky.
Was it just passed down from person to person?
Yeah, oral traditions.
Tradition? Okay.
Oral traditions.
Okay.
Some records, but nothing real firm. So we will likely never know. Right? But this is one of the claimants for the oldest monotheistic religion.
Okay. If I wanted to visit a Zoroastrian fire temple today, where would I have to go?
India.
Okay.
Yeah. India and a couple of the surrounding countries, there are still pockets, entire communities of Zoroastrians.
Wow.
Now, there are some fascinating overlaps with Judaism and Christianity with Zoroastrianism. In fact, one of the biggest ones, there might be some people out there who already know about this, the three wise men, the Magi, Zoroastrians.
Really? How certain are we of this?
Magi was actually a Zoroastrian thing, right?
Like a priest or
They were wise men. They were learned, not quite priests, but these were scholars in the Zoroastrian tradition. Now, again, we're almost never going to be 100% certain just because of how messy history got way back then. But there is very, very good reason to believe that the Zoroastrians actually had these same prophecies of this Messiah coming, saw the star and went, let's go see who's born King of the Jews.
Straight from the fire temple.
Straight from the fire temple. Here's gifts from our incredibly wealthy Persian type empires, and
wow,
good luck with all that. And so very, very good chance that there were Zoroastrians in that nativity story.
In the Bible. Wow.
In the Bible. Yeah. Well, Zoroastrianism was actually the largest, if not one of the largest religions in the world for most of that era.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, absolutely.
I guess I hadn't really thought about what was going on outside of the Holy Land, right?
Yeah.
This very small geographic area.
Well, you think about the size and power of the Persian Empire.
Yeah.
Zoroastrians. A lot of them, or from a lot of its history. They were, in fact, Zoroastrians. Now, obviously, it kind of spread out from Persia, and then the Islamic faith kind of came and washed all that away, and that's why Zoroastrianism now is mostly in India, right? Because most places where it were later converted to Islam.
Okay.
Right? And so, yeah, that's why it is no longer centered in Persia. Now, one last little tidbit before we move on, because we got a lot of people we want to get through today. There is one, the threads are like spider webs, right? These are thin connections. But I did find a few connections here, because one of the basic tenets of Zoroastrianism is there is good and there is truth. And it is your job as a mortal to seek out that truth, right? And so this guy and his followers were known as worshipers of wisdom. Seeing this coming yet? It's going to be fun. You would even say that they were lovers of wisdom. And the Greeks, when they picked up this lovers of wisdom, philo, soph, philosophers.
Oh.
It has been suggested that that word, lover of wisdom, came from Zoroastrians in general, and possibly Zarathustra himself.
Oh, wow.
And that he was the first philosopher, a lover of wisdom, where he was actually worshiping truth itself as a form of light, fire symbol and all that. But yeah, like I said, I don't know how confident I am about that, because like I said, it's kind of thin threads, but you look at where even the first Greek philosophers came right around 600 BC. That same guy. So there was this idea spreading out through the world of loving and almost worshiping the idea of truth and wisdom and seeking out things. And yeah, this kind of spread out. And right around that same time, you had Greeks coming up with these philosophers, these wisdom lovers, which is just fascinating. This is kind of a fun thing. Next week, we are going to have Michael Brinkerhoff on here. And he is a linguist. Okay?
That should be interesting.
Studies all these languages. He is actually in the chat right here. And he says, based on the language and the poems that are attributed to him, it seems that it is most likely 1500 BC. And that is one of the things that's one of the things that came up with the whole 1500 BC is they do actually have his original writings. Okay?
Really?
Yeah. His poems, his hymns, he essentially wrote hymns that contained his teachings. Now, he didn't like do an autobiography or anything, so we still don't have like, I was born in the year, whatever. But we don't have that. We just have these hymns that have his teachings. And yeah, that's one of the things that they've been able to come up with. By the way, join us next week. We're actually going to be talking to Michael Brinkerhoff, the linguist, and that's going to be fun. But yeah, that's one of the ways that we're able to kind of dial in is what words did he use, what language techniques did he use, and when did those come into existence? So yeah, 1500 is about the earliest. But then there were some competing historical type documents that put him closer to 600, but it didn't quite match the language, and that's where we get this range.
Interesting. I see in the chat, he says, unfortunately, only Parsis are allowed to enter fire temples. Since I don't know what a Parsi is, I'm going to assume that I'm not one.
You're probably not.
That is deeply disappointing to me.
All right. Sorry, folks. No visiting fire temples.
Pity.
Okay, so I'm going to I'm going to leave off Zarathustra right there, but obviously, yeah, possibly the first philosopher, possibly the founder of the first monotheistic religion. And yeah, just generally quite fascinating, a lot of their things. And like I said, there's only about 200,000 left, partially because they kind of brought it all in, like they didn't allow interfaith marriages, and they didn't really allow proselyting. They almost discouraged conversion, so it was just a family thing, right? You're Zoroastrian because your parents were Zoroastrian, and yeah, that's kind of led to a dwindling of the faith to, like I said, nowadays there's only about 200,000.
Interesting. That is a whole lot of stuff that I did not know
And
about
that is the point of this show.
Zoroastrianism.
Thus spake Zarathustra.
Yeah. I had heard, obviously I had heard of Zoroastrianism and I had heard of Zarathustra, but mostly because of, the music, and like Nietzsche wrote a book borrowing the phrase, thus spake Zarathustra. By the way, you mentioned this. What does the name Zarathustra mean?
Oh, so again, and maybe our linguists can help us with this, but the language at that time, their names often kind of told a story, and we don't have a perfect understanding of their language at that time. But according to one source I read, the name of his father was essentially he who owns gray horses.
Okay.
And Zarathustra's name, one possibility was he who is with angry camels, possibly giving the idea of someone who went out and like tamed camels or got them settled down, right? Someone who was like,
oh, really?
Like a camel whisperer.
Camel tamer.
Camel tamer, yes.
Okay.
Which, like I said, we knew that he was a priest at least later on in life, until about 30 is when he had his vision and said, no, there's only one God. But yeah, that is one version of his name, is that guy with the angry camels, which is kind of cool. And if we make it far enough in this, we're going to talk about some other very fascinating names. So there's some cool names. But like I said, we will leave Zarathustra.
Okay. So, my first entry is a woman who will eventually become a saint.
Catholic saint.
Catholic saint.
Catholic
Eastern
saint.
Orthodox.
Oh, so not Catholic.
Saint. Eastern Orthodox. Catholic.
Eastern Orthodox. Not Catholic.
Not Roman Catholic. Oh, boy.
Okay. We have run into a legitimate conflict of ideas. I would say, from my time in Ukraine, that the very words Catholic and Orthodox, anyone in one of those two religions would not want to be referred to by the other.
Okay.
So you would not call an Orthodox person a Catholic, and you would not call a Catholic an Orthodox. There was a very major split, largely dealing with the split of the Roman Empire.
Right.
The West and the East. But it was that antipathy that actually led to some of the Fourth Crusade, right? Where they came down, sacked Constantinople. This was a holy crusade, and they were killing Christians, right? It was Christians murdering Christians. But who they were killing were Orthodox.
Okay.
And so this was a major schism in Christianity. So
right.
That's why I have this almost pre-cringe if you say Catholic Orthodox, because there was a major split there.
Okay.
This was no small thing.
My bad.
So
Eastern Orthodox.
Okay, I'm right back
Which
on.
I don't know why. I had this preconception in my mind that Roman Catholic was called Roman Catholic because there was another kind of Catholic, the Eastern one.
While it was still under a united Roman Empire,
Yeah.
then yes, it was still technically under one. But those two branches continued to grow apart, and tensions between them started to grow. In fact, if you look at the actual meaning of Catholic and Orthodox, they pretty much, like, the words themselves almost mean the same things.
Yes.
But these two centers of power grew apart. The doctrines even started to shift more away from one another. And yes, they were, by the time of the actual split of the Roman Empire, or the fall of Rome, which to an Eastern Orthodox person would just be ironic, because Rome never fell. Those guys over there fell. We're fine. Right? The whole Byzantine Empire. That word is ridiculous because it was a created word.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They didn't call themselves Byzantines. They called themselves Romans.
Right.
But yes, as far as the faith goes, that was a major split between the East and West of the Roman Empire. And yes, religion was a very, very big part of that. And that schism remains stronger than ever to today.
Okay, I have heard you use a word that I'm going to absolutely butcher right now. That is pravoslavny or pravoslavny?
Yes, pravoslavny.
Something like that? Okay, what does that mean?
That means Orthodox.
That means Orthodox.
Yes.
I could have sworn I've heard you use the phrase pravoslavny Catholic. But man, I must be mistaken. Anyway.
I did not, I would not.
Okay. So,
I might have said something very close to that, because Cerkov, which sounds a bit like Catholic, would come after pravoslavny.
Fair. So, since I've embarrassed myself with the stuff that comes later in her life, let's jump right into pagans.
Sweet.
Because before becoming a saint, Princess Olga of Kiev...
that would absolutely be Orthodox.
Yes.
Awesome.
No, okay. Let's get this out of the way. Later on in her life, after she has some grand adventures, which we will get into, she goes down the river to Constantinople. She meets with Constantine the Seventh. They have something of a friendship. He wants it to be more than a friendship, because she is both beautiful and intelligent. But she says, well, you can't marry me because I'm a pagan. He says, well,
Have
we
I got
can
a deal
fix
for you?
that. And proceeds to teach her all of these things. And she says, okay, I would like to be baptized, and I would like you to be my godfather. And he says, okay, that sounds great. And helps to teach her, and like presides over her baptism and the whole thing, and then says, now we can get married. And she says, can't. You're my godfather.
Zing!
Yeah. And he just says, according to the record, he just says, you have outwitted me, Olga. And awards her a bunch of gifts, and she goes home. Lives the rest of her life promoting Christianity in Kiev and Rus. But really very few people join. It's only her grandson that really gets Christianity to take off. But because of her efforts, and because of her very close relationship with Constantine the Seventh, she is eventually granted sainthood. She is eventually canonized.
Sweet.
Let's go back in time. We've got this sainted lady that everybody loves and thinks is incredible.
Check.
We're gonna go back a ways.
We're going to do a redemption story in reverse. We're going to
Yes.
start with her redeemed, a literal saint.
I'm actually going to start with her father-in-law.
Oh, all the way back.
He is not a saint. He never becomes a saint. But in researching this, I found the Russian Primary Chronicle, or a translation of the Russian Primary Chronicle, which is the oldest record that we have of Olga of Kiev.
Cool.
I thought it was going to be very boring, because this is 10th century Russian history. And sure enough, there's a whole lot of this guy begat this guy, begat this guy, begat this guy. But then out of nowhere, you get stories like the story of Oleg and the siege of Tsargrad.
Okay.
Oleg is Olga's father-in-law. And he has made a name for himself as a warlord in Kievan Rus, modern-day Ukraine. Well, Ukraine and Russia and Estonia and all kinds of places. He has made a name for himself as a warlord. And he sends messengers to the Greek city of Tsargrad and says, I'm coming to take all your stuff.
Get it ready.
Put up your dukes. Because I'm coming with 2,000 ships.
Oh, dang.
And they say, oh, okay. And they go, and being good engineers and being very clever, they go and they barricade the river so that he can't get his ships in. And he gets there, says, okay, fine, beaches all 2,000 ships, has his warriors put wheels on them.
What?
And when the wind is right, they sail their ships across the open plain to lay siege to the city.
Wow.
Yes!
I did not see that coming.
Oleg for the win! Tsargrad is so overwhelmed at the sight.
I would be a little bit taken aback myself, I'll admit.
I imagine it as Mad Max Fury Road, but every car is Matthew McConaughey from Sahara.
That's an image.
Tsargrad is so overwhelmed that they surrender and offer Oleg almost 1,000,000 grivna, which is 150 tons of silver.
Oh, dang.
As ransom for the city.
By the way, the grivna is, to this day, the unit of currency in Ukraine.
Yeah.
Though the plural is griven, by the way.
Oh, grievin.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, they
Grievin
were
is
these
one.
neat little, at that time, there were these little, they were these little rhomboid coins.
They
They're
are
really
not.
interesting. It's really interesting shape. But yeah, offered them. So I just wanted to tell that story because it was the greatest thing I've stumbled upon by accident
Out of nowhere.
while doing research.
Boats on wheels!
Now, this is immediately followed by pages upon pages of dull contract language
Ew.
about the subsequent treaty set up between Oleg and the Greeks. Anyway, so jumping forward in time, Oleg dies
As one does.
by stomping on a horse's skull that had a snake in it. It's a whole different story. We'll get to it a different day. Actually, I can. Okay.
Yeah, no, we better talk about the snake
about
in the
this.
horse's head real quick.
Oleg has become unstoppable, but one of his soothsayers comes to him and says, I have terrible news. Your horse is going to be responsible for your death. And he says, that's my favorite horse.
Shame.
Well, I can't just kill my favorite horse. So he gives it to one of his servants and says, okay, you need to keep this horse away from me until it dies. Just take it away. Make sure that it's well fed. Make sure that it's well groomed. I want it to live comfortably for the rest of its days out in the wilderness somewhere.
I like Oleg better for that story.
Yeah.
That was awesome. Yeah, most people would have just killed the horse.
Yeah.
It's like, no. Take it to a farm. Let him run free.
Many years go by, and somebody mentions, hey, remember that soothsayer that said you were going to die? And he says, yeah, whatever. What happened to my horse? And they say, oh, yeah, we were meaning to tell you, crossed our mind years ago, that horse died. And he says, ha, well, I beat that soothsayer. Obviously, I beat that horse. But I would be interested in seeing him one more time. And so they take him out to the wilderness where the horse lived, and its skeleton is still there. And he says, well, joke's on you, horse. I won this one. And he steps on the skull as he leaves, crushing it and scaring out the snake that was living inside. which bites him on the ankle, and he sickens and dies.
Wow.
Leaving the throne to his son, Igor. Now, Igor is an okay king. He's not great. He's not bad. He goes and tries to conquer Zargrad again, and they just kind of say, well, what if we just give you the same deal that we gave Oleg? And he says, fine. Igor isn't very exciting. Just doesn't really do much.
Fair enough.
He just kind of collects tribute and lives off of what his dad did. And you get the impression that he had kind of a complex about it. Because there was this tribe called the Drevlians that had been a little bit rebellious about the tribute that they paid. They paid their tribute in furs.
Okay.
And they had been getting kind of rebellious about paying the tribute. So he takes an army and goes to the Drevlians and says, you pay up right now. And they say, okay, fine. Here's your furs. He says, oh, fine, great. Takes the furs, goes home, gets halfway and says, you know what? No. I want extra furs because they didn't give it the first time that I asked.
And how am I ever supposed to be a conqueror if people keep surrendering?
Oh my, yeah, exactly. I'm going to go back and I'm going to show them, and I'm only going to take a handful of guys, and we're going to go back to the city and we're going to show them what's what. The Drevlians see him coming, and they send out a messenger, and the messenger asks, what are you doing coming back here? We gave you what you wanted. And he says, I'm not going to talk to you. I'm only going to talk to the elders. And so the messenger goes back and says, he's coming here. He seems really belligerent and angry. I think we should kill him. Does everyone agree? And everyone, yes, actually, he seems like a crazy person. We should murder him.
All in favor of murder, say I.
All in favor. He shows up, demanding more furs. They say, right this way. They have...
We keep them in the Stark Alley.
Gruesome content warning. The Drevlians were called the people of the trees.
Oh.
Because they lived in the forest and lived mostly off of trapping and stuff. They take him to a grove of beech trees, where they have taken 2 beech trees and bent them all the way to the ground so their tops are almost touching.
I see this one coming.
See this one coming?
Oh, yeah.
He gets tied to both trees, and they let the trees go, and Igor is no longer a problem.
Neither half.
Neither half of Igor is going to threaten the Drevlians anymore.
Okay, good. Well...
So, the Drevlians, now delighted with this turn of events, because they go out and the army is kind of scattered. You know, Igor's army is scattered and everything is kind of falling apart for Kiev. Their prince, whose name is Mal, says, you know what would be ideal right now is if we stepped in and had me, Prince Mal, marry Princess Olga. Then we step in, take over everything that Kiev
Mal
has.
the Drevlian...
Mal the Drevlian, who
Prince.
just murdered Olga's husband, now wants to step in and marry Olga, taking over all of their territory and all of their tributes.
So he just killed her husband and says, hey, how about you and I get hitched and...
Yes. He sends
Okay,
20
bold.
of his finest men in their finest boat up to Kiev. And they go in and say, surprise, you're a widow. We killed Igor. We thought he was pretty lame. But we have a great business opportunity. You marry Prince Mal. We take over everything. And also we take over your very young son. And we take over your entire kingdom, and I don't really know what's in it for you, but
Sign
that's
here.
the deal. Sign here, yes. She says, you know what? You guys have got a point. I know when I'm beat. But the people do not. I need to show them that I am on board with this. I need to show them how deeply I honor you.
Got to show that support.
So you get back on your boat, and in the morning, we'll come down to the riverside and invite you back to the palace. You say, no, we're not getting off our boat. We won't even grace your city with our footsteps again. You have to carry us in the boat. And I will say, yes, we'll carry you through the streets. We'll form a parade. Everybody's going to be on board with this.
Orchestrates a grand entrance.
Yes. And that's exactly how it goes off. She goes down. They say, we're not getting off the boat. She gets together all of her men. They lift the boat out of the water, carry it through the streets. People are following, cheering. They're waving from on top of the boat. They go up. The palace is on top of this, on top of this hill. That's like cliffs on several sides. It's a very defensible place. They carry it through the city and up this hill, up into the palace courtyard, with all of the people following and cheering. And when they get there, there's a great big pit. And they just drop the boat in. And Princess Olga leans over the edge and says, how do you like, or how does, she says, are my honors to your taste? And they fill in the hole.
Oh, didn't even shoot them or burn them, just buried
them alive.
Oh,
in the ship.
Oh no, hope you like the parade.
With everyone cheering, right? That's what everyone was cheering for, was she had gone out and told them, in the morning, we bury them all alive. She decides she's not done yet. She's just gotten a taste of that sweet, sweet revenge.
Well, that went so well.
So she sends a messenger and says, okay, I have accepted your terms. Your men are here with me. Send your elders, your wise men, your nobles to accompany me back to your kingdom.
Send an honor guard of your best and brightest.
Send an honor guard of your best and brightest, exactly.
Claim your prize, princess.
Precisely. They show up, and she says, okay, nice try, guys, but you're all very dirty from the road. We have constructed this brand new bathhouse. Please come in, bathe, refresh yourselves, wash your clothes, and as soon as you are feeling bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, we shall get on the road.
Is there no end to her hospitality?
Great question, Lance. Great question. Because, okay, no sooner have they gotten inside than her men shut and bar the doors and light the building on fire. And they all stand around and watch as the best and brightest of the Drevlians burn alive. Olga's still not done. She sends another messenger. There are still more Drevlians. She sends another messenger and says, okay, I'm on my way. Your honor guard is coming back by the main road.
They were great, by the way.
They were great. I'm going back by a different course so that I can visit the city where my husband was killed and hold a funeral feast for him. Please send 5,000 of your best soldiers to accompany me at that feast. And they say, okay, that makes sense. And they send all of their people, and they get to the city, and she sees her husband, and they hold the funeral and everything. And she says, okay, now we have this great big feast. We have brought a truly inordinate amount of mead. Drink up, you guys.
Drinks on me.
They drink this. It may have been poison, may not have been, but they drink until they are thoroughly incapacitated. And then Olga just waves her hands, and her honor guard starts slitting throats. With her reportedly walking through the midst of the carnage, encouraging her men to the slaughter.
All 5,000, huh?
All 5,000, not a survivor.
See, this is why you have a designated driver. Someone who doesn't drink with the rest of the party. Someone who can get you home safe and, raise the alarm if all your people are being murdered.
Someone that you trust to tell you when something isn't as it should be. She's not done yet.
Oh, for heaven's sakes.
She gathers her armies and meets the Drevlians in the field. Her son throws the first spear to start the battle. But because he is a toddler...
How about to say, isn't he?
He is
tiny?
He is somewhere between the ages of 3 and 12 at this point.
Okay.
He tries to throw the spear. It barely misses the horse's ear, hits the ground, falls backward, and hits his own horse. It's not an auspicious start.
No.
But they go out, they crush and smash the Drevlians, scatter them, and then they descend on the last city and lay siege to it for a year.
Ooh.
At the end of a year, Olga comes to the leaders of the city, which I can't remember if Prince Mal is even alive at this point. She goes to the leaders of the city and says, why are we still doing this? I want to go back home. You want to plant your fields. Let's make peace.
Hasn't this gone on long enough?
This has gone on long enough.
I'm so tired of killing all your people.
Because after all, wasn't this just about tribute? So I'm going to ask for one more tribute, and then I'll be on my way. Now, this next bit, I have heard ascribed to a number of historical figures, including Genghis Khan.
Oh.
But this is the OG. She is the real figure that did this. She says, all right, last tribute. For every house in... Oh, man, I almost remember the name of the city. I don't. But for every house in the city, I want 3 pigeons and 3 sparrows. Now, this sounds very unusual, but that is how tribute was calculated at the time. I went back through the chronicle, and it was for every house in such and such a village, they would give this much gold or this many furs.
But she asked for pigeons and
She
sparrows.
asked for pigeons and sparrows, which, homing pigeons and things. And so they're a little weirded out by this request. But honestly, to lift a year-long siege...
Oh, anything at this
they'll
point.
figure it out. And so they do, actually. They gather up all of these birds, because apparently it wasn't actually that big of a town. They gather up all these birds, say, here you go. Thank you so much. She says, pleasure doing business. I'll be off first thing in the morning.
Oh, no.
They say, cool. They skitter back to their homes. She distributes the birds among her men, along with cloth and sulfur. They tie the sulfur to the birds and let them go. All of the birds return to their nests with these sulfur-soaked rags, and somehow, it's not clear whether they put fuses or whether they fired burning arrows or what, the entire city goes up in flames like that.
All the birds went home carrying the incendiaries with them. You make the whole town a...
Sparrows from every house.
Oh.
Was what she requested. So when they send them back, they're now carrying these sulfurous rags that will start at just the tiniest spark. And suddenly the entire town is in flames. They're all trying to put out the fires. She moves in with her troops and slaughters everyone. In the morning, true to her word, she packs up and leaves. and the only Drevlians still alive are her slaves.
Ho, ho, ho.
Later, after ruling peacefully for many years, she goes down the river to Constantinople, meets Constantine VII. They start up a friendship.
And she becomes a saint.
And she becomes a saint. She is the patron saint, not making this up, of widows.
Oh.
And converts, because she was herself a convert.
And a widow.
And a widow.
Well then,
Princess
she understands.
Olga, patron saint of widows.
Oh, man.
And the scourge of the Drevlians.
Well, that was amazing.
And took up way more time than I was planning.
Yes.
On. Next.
Okay. I had a few more here, but obviously we're going to run out of time. I absolutely want to talk about one fascinating religious figure that I think most people don't even realize was a religious figure, and that was Pythagoras. Now, anyone who has sat through 10th grade geometry knows about the Pythagorean theorem, right? How you calculate the sides of a triangle. And he did, in fact, have something to do with that. It had actually been around for about 1,000 years. It's claimed by some he was the one who proved it, but there's some wiggle room in, as far as Pythagoras actually coming up with the Pythagorean theorem.
His proof is fantastic, by the way. Have you seen it?
The geometric one?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's lots of fun.
Just pebbles and sand.
Yep.
Great stuff.
And so he is obsessed with math and gets this idea that all the world is based on numbers and that numbers hold the truth behind the very nature of the universe. And he starts gathering followers, right? And he has the numbers. He actually comes up with things like odd and even numbers, right? He's the one who came up with that because he is describing them. He ascribes to them powers and personalities, right?
Shapes. Got square numbers, triangular numbers.
Yes. He goes deep into this whole number thing. In fact, one legend, which I'm going to refer to all these as legends.
That is fair.
Because it's amazing how much we don't actually know about Pythagoras. And part of that was his own fault. Because he starts this math cult. And one of their key tenets is secrecy.
Yes.
First rule of math club, you do not talk about math club. Okay.
Well, can I talk about the square root of 2 real quick?
I was going to bring it up, but you can have it if you want it.
Continue.
Okay. To the point. Now, once again, all this is legend. We don't know because he himself was so incredibly secretive. But there is one legend that one of his students figures out that a triangle with equal sides, that its hypotenuse, right, the line connecting them, will not be a whole number. In fact, cannot be a whole number. This student, whose name is lost to antiquity and legend, might have been the one to discover irrational numbers and brings this to his teacher Pythagoras, who again, numbers had become a religious, mystical thing, and proves this idea of irrational numbers, right? The square root of 2, which is what you get if you have a triangle of equal sides. And according to legend, Pythagoras kills him, murders him to cover up this dangerous blasphemy of irrational numbers. Anything you wanted to add to that one? Because I still want to get to Pythagoras and the beans.
Yeah, well, Pythagoras' whole shtick, his whole theory, was that everything in the world could be described as a whole number or as a fraction, right? whole
a
number
ratio of whole numbers.
divided by another whole number.
Yes.
But he works with triangles all the time. So all the time he's running across these numbers that can't be described as fractions, that never repeat and never end. And by some accounts, he knows about this, but has kept it to his most loyal followers. And when this guy threatens to go public with the square root of 2, he doesn't have any choice but to put the hit out on the man.
Deep.
And we treat this as very silly, because to us, this is common everyday stuff. But at the time, the whole idea of number theory was brand new.
Oh, in many ways, he is credited with the discovery, the development of numbers as abstract concepts.
Yes.
Which is so weird. Like nowadays, it's hard to even imagine. But, back in the day, this was one book, right? One didn't exist by itself. It was one of something, right? Here's one book, and one book and one book make 2 books. But you didn't have that 1 + 1 = 2. You didn't have these abstract numbers. And yeah, he kind of, with his mysticism, in many ways, kind of brought about this whole idea of abstract numbers that tortures young algebra students the world over.
Yeah, well, this is centuries and centuries before algebra comes around, right? We are still just arithmetic is still, of all things, arithmetic is still groundbreaking stuff. Anyway, I
Adding,
am something
subtracting, dividing. It's mind-blowing
it's
stuff.
very,
kids.
very strange. I am something of a geometer myself.
I am aware.
And so
Mike is an engineer.
Yes, I am. Specifically a design engineer who specializes in complex geometry. So I thought I knew a lot about Pythagoras. But when you said something about getting to the beans, I have no idea what you're talking about. Please enlighten me.
This was a rabbit hole for me. I had no idea how much beans were going to factor into my study of Pythagoras. I was astounded, to put it lightly. So, we don't know exactly how Pythagoras died. That is one of the things that there are multiple versions, and because of all the secrecy surrounding him, we don't know for sure. One version is that an enemy general was coming to kill him, and that his only escape route was through a bean field. But Pythagoras, as everyone knew, would not come near beans, and so stayed and died. That is one version.
Okay.
Now, I could not pass that up, right? I'm not going to walk away from Pythagoras wouldn't go near beans.
Well, why would you? Okay.
Especially since he was a vegetarian. Part of his math cult thing, right? Math club gone horribly, horribly wrong, was they were vegetarians, but no beans. No beans. And so I start trying to track this down. Find out Pythagoras, whose father I believe was a merchant, actually put his father put a lot of effort and money and travel even into getting Pythagoras educated. And one of the places he sent him was Egypt. And that is where I learned that the Egyptian priests would not eat beans. This was something he had learned in his training, is that beans were either evil or sacred. This put me down more of the rabbit hole, discovering sacred beans even in Christian lore. There was one town, I think around 1000 AD, who was going through this extreme drought. All the plants had died. They prayed to St. Joseph, if memory serves, and the rains came and the beans grew back. No other plant, right? They'd been too dry for too long. They all died. And so the beans came back. And so there was this miracle of the beans, and beans were seen as sacred then. And all the way back, we see other examples of beans being just so hardy that they were seen as a literal miracle. Right here is the brown decaying death of a desert, and here comes the fava bean specifically. And so it's seen as this miraculous thing. And so the priests would, because the beans were so amazing,
or else evil.
we haven't quite got to the evil yet.
Okay.
Right? The Egyptian priests, it was more of like, these beans are this great thing, and that was like a way of them sacrificing. We won't eat the beans, right? We won't.
Like a vow of poverty.
Yes, like a vow of poverty. Which, by the way, Pythagoras also had his mathematikoi, which is what the inner circle were called, could not own things.
Oh, wow.
I'm not making this up. Right?
Okay.
There was an outer circle who still followed his teachings, but didn't do the whole vegetarian and not owning things path. I forget the name, but the inner circle I remember were called the mathematikoi, which is just amazing.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Now, so we have these beans. The fava beans specifically were these sacred beans.
Okay, sacred beans.
Sacred beans because of how often they save people. But then you also have, in fact, fava beans used to be, I ran across this in a cookbook, right? I'm all over the place here. Fava beans were originally used for falafel. They are no longer. Garbanzo beans, otherwise known as chickpeas, are now used in falafel because an entire people in the Middle East developed a genetic allergy to fava beans. And so the sacred bean had turned on the people. And it is suspected that possibly Pythagoras was one of these people who was allergic
to sacred beans.
Allergic to sacred beans. They're evil beans. Right? And
evil Pythagoras.
Right? And
who are we to question the beans?
Who are we to question the beans? Right? So this is just going nuts. And that's not even the end, because turns out he was all wrapped up into this, like, mysticism stuff where you have air and wind and spirit as kind of these conjoined things. And then you eat beans, which were especially fava beans, were very fleshy, right? When crushed and left out in the sun, were said to have the same smell as a murdered man's blood. I don't know how they differentiated between those smells.
That's a very specific smell.
And they were also shaped like, we're just going to say multiple human organs.
Okay.
And so it was believed by some, and again, possibly Pythagoras, that eating beans was a form of cannibalism, and that you would take in spirits, and these spirits would build up inside of you, and
this is going exactly where I hoped it would.
I know. We have somehow brought you, ladies and gentlemen, to a fart joke. Somehow.
Wow.
That this was evil because it was cannibalism, and other philosophers and historians of the time mocked Pythagoras. There was one.
Why? I think this is all perfectly reasonable.
I think Herodotus actually called beans the relatives of Pythagoras as a dig at Pythagoras for thinking that beans were flesh and people and spirits, and that it was cannibalism to eat beans.
Oh boy.
And that was the rabbit hole that I went down with
boy.
Pythagoras and the beans. And yes, there is still a possibility that he was not crazy. He was allergic and had concrete evidence, right? We're coming full circle back to belief being whatever evidences you choose to accept. He would have had the concrete evidence of, I ate a fava bean once. The priest told me not to. I ate one. I was sick for days.
I nearly died.
There were clearly evil spirits exiting me. Never again. I will never again make that sin of eating beans.
And that brings us back to the faith thing, because when you've got a murderer behind you and a bean field in front of you,
yes,
that's testing how much do I actually believe in evil beans.
He had faith. He
Stab
had
me,
faith
bro.
in the evil beans. Better death by the sword than death by beans.
Death by beans.
Yes.
Wow.
It's worth the wait, wasn't it?
It really was.
And yes, so, boys and girls, when you read about Pythagoras in your math classes, just remember the noble bean that may or may not have brought down Pythagoras. Now, this has been awesome. I fear we're pretty much out of time. Do we want to do a lightning round?
Let's do lightning round just because we have a few stories left. And I feel there is so much material here, and I want to cover it at least briefly. So yeah, we're already a little bit over time, but let's lightning round through the last few. Okay.
You start. Let's keep it choppy.
12th of September, 1897, the Battle of Saragari. I think I pronounced that right. No promises. At this time, we have a very large army coming out of Afghanistan and into what was at the time British-controlled territory, modern-day Pakistan. There are a whole bunch of forts set up along this ridge. It's called the Samana Ridge. That are stationed there are British soldiers and Sikh soldiers of the 36th Sikh Regiment.
Again, to be clear to everyone, Sikh is a religion.
Yes.
Right? So these are devotees of a specific religion. Sikhs, they have a fairly simplistic tenets. Do you have those? What does a Sikh believe? Let's just give the three main points.
The broadest possible doctrine of Sikhism, insofar as I have researched, is oneness, right? That we should strive to be one with the rest of the human race, that we should seek for unity, that we should seek for harmony. It is a oneness of mankind, one with God, one with each other, unity.
So monotheistic.
Well, that's actually apparently a very interesting point. But basically monotheistic, it came about because there was this guru, and I'm very sorry, I can't pronounce his name. I tried to write it out so that it would make sense. I can't. But there was this guru in 1469 who just kind of stepped away from everything and said, you know what? I think that the caste system sucks. Treating people badly just because of the family that they were born into or where they were born or because of something that their parents or grandparents did, that's awful, and I'm going to stop doing it. And instead, we're going to live by this very simple creed of remember God, earn an honest living, share with others.
That's some rock solid doctrine right there.
That's rock solid doctrine. And
I like it.
That was the whole idea was, you know what? No, we're all brothers and sisters. Let's just all get along.
Let's bring it down to the basics. I like it.
Everyone hated this. Because the whole lot of people, specifically all of the people in power, were really making a lot of money and gaining a lot of power from the caste system. So coming out and saying we should get rid of the caste system says we should get rid of your power, person in power. So, yeah, they spend the next, well, kind of forever, up until, unfortunately, up to present, being frequently persecuted for their beliefs. So, at the, I can't remember if it's the 8th or the 10th guru, there have been a lot of martyrs.
And gurus are their religious leaders.
Yes. There are the 10 gurus who kind of founded the religion. Several of them become martyrs, and I think it's either the 8th or the 10th comes out and says, you know what, we're done with this. Every Sikh man from now on is a warrior.
We're all one, but we're also really tired of getting stabbed, shot, and generally persecuted.
Well, they cultivate this culture of the warrior saint. Right? Just those two words together sound so cool. They cultivate the culture of the warrior saint, which is that when there is wrongdoing, you must be prepared to step in both from a moral standpoint and, if necessary, a physical standpoint.
It is worth noting at this point that the symbols and emblems of the Sikh religion are knives and swords.
And chakram.
Yes, they have literally holy blades or symbolic blades that an average Sikh will wear on their person at pretty much all times, which is, again, kind of fun.
So, the Sikhs spend most of their history being heavily persecuted. I'm not doing a good job keeping the lightning in this lightning round.
No.
They spend most of their history being heavily persecuted. Finally, they managed to establish a kingdom, and you could even call it an empire. It's often called an empire. And they start fighting amongst themselves, and it falls apart, and the British swoop in and take everything, as the British are known to do.
As the British do.
Yeah. So the British have now taken over all of India and Pakistan, right? Your British Hindustan or whatever.
Yes.
The Sikhs, the Gurkhas, all of these other people are now in service to the British in the hopes that they will be able to once again assert autonomy and get their kingdoms back. And besides, the Sikhs have this idea of you've got to be a warrior. And the British are the ones in charge. They're looking for warriors. Here we are.
Win-win.
Let's do this. In fact, it is right in their national anthem. Hang on, I've got this.
The Sikhs' national anthem?
The Sikh national anthem.
Okay.
It's like the first or second couplet of it is, when it comes time to breathe my last, may I die fighting in battle.
Okay.
That there's no, like, if the situation calls for it, it's like, no, I really want to die fighting in battle.
So
No conditionals.
remember God, earn an honest living, share with others, be ready to throw down at all times.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So, the British have taken over all this stuff. They've built a series of forts along this ridge, the Samana Ridge. An army of 25,000 Afghan tribesmen come invading the area and actually drive off the major British army in the area. It's a little more complicated than that, but basically they've overrun this whole position. But these forts are still there, and they're falling rapidly. There are two major forts left: Fort Lockhart and Fort Gulistan, or Gulistan, depending on who you talk to. And they're trying to just stay above water until reinforcements can come. And they've been heavily besieged, but they're kind of doing this thing because they have this heliograph this mirror messaging system where they can blink out Morse code using sunshine.
Cool.
Back and forth between the forts, and are able to coordinate these strikes to kind of keep the enemy guessing.
The British were way clever.
The British were very clever. They were often racist, horrible, and imperialist, but
Who wasn't?
they were very good at the whole killing people thing. So, they've managed to stay one step ahead of these guys for a while. But now, everything's getting overrun. In between Lockhart and Gulliston is a tiny little fort on this, like, Pride Rock-looking promontory that's called Fort Sadagari. And there are 21 Sikhs stationed there, led by Havildar Ishar Singh. All Sikhs take the surname Singh, so...
Oh, really? Okay, so if you run into somebody named Singh...
Yeah, they are likely either Sikh or have Sikh ancestry.
Or descended from Sikhs. Okay.
Yeah. So Ishar is the leader of this. He's the Havildar, or sergeant of this group. The function of this fort is to pass messages back and forth between these two because they don't have line of sight. So they can take messages from Lockhart, pass it to Gulliston.
So they're the connection.
They're the connection that's letting these two forts stay alive.
Okay.
The tribesmen, the rebels, figure this out. And they send 10,000 soldiers.
Against 21 Sikhs?
Against 21 Sikhs.
Do they win, Mike?
Well, this is a lightning round, so no. Your story, lads. Okay, so what happens is they do not win. But for 7 hours, 21 Sikhs hold off 10,000 soldiers in a fort whose walls are only 9 feet tall.
Oh, dang.
You thought you knew this story because you saw the movie.
I did see the movie. It kind of hurt my brain a little bit, but no, I was picturing big fort and be able to push people back. So this is more like hand to hand.
This is a
for 7 hours.
This is a 9 foot tall wall and a wooden gate. Not only that, in the very first assault, the Afghans send in sappers that are able to find a blind spot in the wall and start digging underneath. So the wall collapses around noon.
How far into the attack is that?
That's 4 hours in.
Okay. You said for 7 hours they held off? So 3 hours essentially without a wall?
Yes.
Holy cow.
There was a lot of murder I don't want to say murder. There was a lot of killing going on. So, yeah, a lot of it was hand to hand because they had they had the Henry rifles, the Martini Henry rifles, which they could fire at 20 rounds a minute.
Not bad.
So that's pretty good, especially because the Afghans would have had much older rifles. They're probably firing much slower. The only problem is they only have about 400 rounds per soldier.
Oh.
Doing the math on that, it's 20 minutes worth of ammo for 7 hours.
Oh, man.
So, eventually, they send back a message. Apparently, they were having trouble because there was such a deluge of fire coming in that they had actually lost several rifles to the rifles themselves being shot.
Oh, man.
When they popped up to fire at the enemy. After several hours of this, they managed to break in the gate and collapse the wall at the same time and come swarming in. Ishar sends most of his men into this inner fort area where the watchtower is and pulls a Horatio at the bridge. Him and 2 others hold back this entire army so that his men can get to relative safety.
Wow.
And they're varying accounts about what goes on there, but he manages to hold them off for some time before he is overwhelmed. The last few managed to hold out for several more hours until there is just one person left. It's the soldier, the sepoy, who was running the heliograph.
Oh, man.
The whole reason for holding this fort was so that they could continue to run messages between Lockhart and Gulliston. So when the whole thing came, they had the chance to run away, and when all of these other forts in the area had been attacked, everyone had just run, which is the appropriate thing to do.
Yeah.
When it's, a couple of dozen against thousands upon thousands, you run away. The Sikhs said, no, we're staying here. Our job is important, so we're staying. So we know so much about this battle because we had one of the Sikhs on top of the watchtower running messages the entire time.
Wow.
When it comes down to just him, he messages back to Colonel Houghton, who is the commanding officer at Lockhart, and essentially messages, everyone is dead, permission to join the fight.
Oh.
Houghton says...
chills.
Yeah. Houghton says permission granted. The last Sikh soldier packs up the heliograph into its case, sets it aside, and waits for them to come through the door. Both forts are watching through a telescope because he is on top of the watchtower. They can see him and are watching with their telescopes what he's doing. As the Afghans break through and make it onto the roof of the watchtower. And he bayonets the first one, and the second, and the third, and the fourth. In the end, he is left standing on top of the watchtower, surrounded by the corpses of 20 tribesmen.
Holy smokes.
The tribesmen, knowing better than to try any more, light the watchtower on fire.
Oh. Strategically, I get it, but
Strategically, it is smart.
Man.
Now, the legend goes, and this is prevalent throughout, and it's really hard to nail down exactly where this originated. It actually could have come from the other side, because they did actually come out and say, like, we have some things to say. One of them killed 15 of us.
This was insane.
With a sword. And yeah, they had things to say. Hard to nail down where this came from. But the entire time the watchtower is burning, everyone in the area can hear this voice chanting, Bole So Nihal. I apologize for the pronunciation. Sat Sri Akal.
What does it mean?
It is the clarion call of the Sikhs. And it means there are a bunch of different translations, which leads me to believe that it's kind of hard to capture the full essence of it. Shout aloud in ecstasy, true is the great timeless one.
Wow.
It is the war cry of the Sikhs. And he just chants it as the tower burns around him. And then...
Wait, there's more? I was ready.
There is a massive explosion as the magazine of the fort detonates.
Oh.
We don't know, unfortunately, if that happened by accident or if the Sikhs rigged it to blow. But that was their final farewell.
Whew.
The fort was reduced to absolute ruins, so the Afghans couldn't use it now as a staging point to strike out at the others. This is, I believe, still to this day, the only battle in British history where every participant was awarded the highest possible military honor.
Nice.
In this case, it has a different name because it's in India. But it's the equivalent of the Victoria Cross for all 21.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Man, that makes the Alamo pale in comparison.
Makes the Alamo look like nothing.
Wow.
So, these 21 become venerated as martyrs of the Sikh cause because Britain, remember, was kind of, the Sikhs' whole mission at this point is to prove to the British that they can handle their own nation, that they deserve to be their own nation.
We are worthy of self-rule.
We are worthy of self-rule, and this, because of the heliograph and because of telegrams, this makes it to London by the next morning.
Oh, man. What a story.
Yeah. Hits the papers the next morning, and it is worldwide news. So, there are shrines, there are churches, gurdwaras, built to these 21, both in India and in England.
Wow.
For Sikhs living in England to be able to go and venerate these martyrs of the cause.
The 21. Nice.
The 21 warrior saints of Satagari.
Satagari. Awesome. Well, I have two things to say. First of all, amazing story. Second of all, Mike, you suck at lightning round.
I really do.
Just the worst. That was, nearly a half hour?
I am not fast.
I will do one lightning round, and then we are cutting it off. Long as we're in America, we will bring up a person known as the American Moses.
Harriet Tubman.
Oh, actually, that would also be a cool one, but that'd be for a different one because she wasn't seen as a religious figure.
Sorry, please continue.
And that would be Brigham Young.
Okay. Controversial figure.
Very controversial figure. In fact, it is even hard, even though he only lived like 150, 170 years ago, and yet it's still difficult to find reliable data on him because you only get the extremes, right? You only find people who thought he was, who believed that he was a prophet of God.
Literally a prophet.
Yeah, literally a prophet of God. And people who thought he was a monster.
The literal devil.
The literal devil. And yeah, that's kind of what you get from the sources of that time.
Mark Twain famously despised the man.
Though there was a fascinating thing. There actually almost became this odd respect when Mark Twain actually came out. But this is not your lightning round, Mike.
Sorry, please continue.
Yes, there were some fascinating back and forth between Mark Twain and Brigham Young. But one of the things that's more fascinating about Brigham Young was I'm going to call it the kingdom, the empire, the theocracy that he created. Before Utah became a state, it was proposed that they join as a territory of Deseret, right? There was almost a state of Deseret. Now, there's a reason why there is not a state of Deseret, because first of all, this was an entire area that would have been about half again as big as the United States itself at this time. So this is a geographical area. I ran the math, larger than Germany and France combined. Would have been about twice as big as Texas is now.
Okay.
Okay. This was huge. By the way, the federal government said no.
Okay. Give us some context for those of us who well, not those of us, but for listeners who did not grow up in the southwestern United States. Give us some context of when we are, and briefly who Brigham Young even was.
Okay, so the religion in question is formerly known as the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, more colloquially known as the Mormons, founded by Joseph Smith, actually in New York. So it starts at the eastern part of the United States, and I won't get too far into the theology, basically saying that the original Church of Christ has been restored and that Joseph Smith is its prophet. It is not received well by the people living in America in that time.
No.
There are still lots and lots of converts to this cause, but they are consistently driven out of wherever they are from.
Yes, quite famously, there is an extermination order.
Yes,
put out
they get
by
all
the
way
governor
up
of
to
Missouri.
Missouri, who is incredibly afraid of these people swinging the vote because they are a very large group of people. They are also famously anti-slavery, and Missouri was a pro-slavery state at that time. And you had this huge population of legal citizens who can vote. And so, yes, Governor Lynburn Boggs actually issues an extermination order. This is happening in America, right in the Constitution, freedom of religion. And he says, anyone who believes this, we are going to kill. By the way, that was only rescinded in the late 1900s.
1970s, wasn't it?
1970s.
Didn't get a formal apology until the early 2000s, I want to say.
Yes, but not your lightning round.
Sorry.
Okay, we got to keep this, got to end this somehow.
Okay.
Anyway, and then Joseph Smith is killed.
Yes.
Okay, at a place called Carthage, a place in Missouri. And at this point, the Mormons, the members of this church, have grown to incredible numbers, right? But in a very hostile environment. And so they leave the United States entirely and go out to what is then, at that point, Mexico. Right? A lot of the Western United States was owned by Mexico, right? New Mexico, Santa Fe, California. These were all Mexican settlements. And so they move out to essentially a place that nobody wanted. This was mountainous desert. Utah, Idaho, Wyoming, parts of California, most of Nevada. You got this huge place that there really wasn't anyone else there because it was really hard to farm. It's still not great for farming. I know some Utah farmers, and they are the most tough, determined people I've ever met.
Persistent.
Because, yeah, I'm sorry, farming at some of these altitudes is just not reasonable. And yet, here they were, this vast amount of people. And Brigham Young, rather than just bringing everybody in and just trying to maintain life, sends them out. By his decree, right? He would just tell people, you go, and he'd send them off on missions is what it would be called, right? You'd gather some people, send them on a mission, but it'd be a mission. You go figure out how to smelt iron in southern Utah. You figure out how to grow cotton. And he formed anywhere from 400 to 500 settlements. Okay?
Wow.
I cannot think of anyone in the modern age who is, settled on that scale. And we aren't going to get too far into it because lightning round, I just want to put 2 quick stories out. First of all, to this day, Utah, especially the Salt Lake City, is known as having the widest streets of any major U.S. city. That goes all the way back to Brigham Young, right? We have these wide 4 lanes of traffic, plenty of room for cars right in the middle of our downtown. And that was because, and I quote, he wanted streets wide enough that a wagon team can turn around without resorting to profanity. That is an actual quote from Brigham Young. And that, of course, worked very well as modernization happened. Another one. This will be my last one.
Okay.
Obviously, all problems eventually came to him. And there were these women who were complaining about how there are only ever male doctors. Now, this wasn't just Utah. This was pretty much worldwide at the time, right? Women at that point weren't even much allowed to be nurses, even. Right?
When is this about? This
Oh,
is
sorry. This is mid
1800s?
Yes, mid 1800s. I want to say 1848 is about the area we're in at this point of this story.
Okay.
And so he creates another mission. He gets, I think it was 2 or 3 women, and he tells them, go back east, right? He sends them out of Deseret, back east, to go and learn the medical arts, right? Sends them out to get this knowledge and bring it back. And so they go out and they learn, and I don't think they were able to become like official doctors or whatever because of the sexism at the time, but they are able to essentially acquire this knowledge, bring it back to Utah, spread it through the women in Utah, create this league of women doctors who very quickly almost outcompete and shove out the male doctors, to where that becomes an active problem that the male doctors are not able to keep up with these women doctors that Brigham Young created through this mission. We lack this medical knowledge. Go get it. Bring it back here.
Your mission is to go back into hostile territory.
Yes, Mormons were still very, very much hated at that time.
And break into a profession that is still
very male-dominated.
ferociously misogynist.
Yes. And yes,
Okay.
acquire that, your mission.
Should you choose
Again.
to accept it?
Again, you got to figure what their religion and their faith was. This was, God wants you to go get this knowledge and bring it back.
Mission from God.
Mission from God, go become a doctor, come
Go
back,
become a
teach everybody
doctor.
else. But yeah.
Wow.
So that'll be my last one. And again, Brigham Young, it's very much a love him or hate him sort of thing. Very controversial figure. But I did like his approach to some of these things. One of the great ironies is that when not Deseret, right? They chopped it up into a whole bunch of other states, right? Utah, Wyoming, Idaho, Arizona, all these states were all part of Deseret, but the federal government did not want this big and powerful of a state entering under the control of largely just one man.
Of a functional theocracy.
Of a functional, very functional theocracy.
Right.
And so they chopped up a million pieces and insisted on other governors. And it really was a calculated thing to just try to divide this a little bit, lest they get, too uppity or whatever. But yeah, it was ironic that when it was under Brigham Young, women had the vote. When they gained statehood, that vote was taken away. And it wasn't until much later that women regained the vote in the United States. But yeah, women actually lost the vote when Utah and again these surrounding states joined the Union as states. And that was just kind of, stupid. If we were to put a word to it. And yes, I believe, again, it's contested. But supposedly the first woman to vote in the United States was in Utah. But like I said, they had the vote before that and lost it.
Just when it was Mexico.
Well, it kind of became a sort of United States territory anyways, because the Mexican War happened around the same time that they were going out there. In fact, right? They just left the United States. They actually immediately got a call to have some of their young men, I mean like fathers still, but go and fight in the Mexican-American War. So even as they were crossing the plains, a lot of their men actually left to go fight on behalf of the United States against Mexico. And so, yeah, those of you who know about the Mexican War, that is actually where we gained a lot of that territory. So yes, they moved out into Mexico and actually contributed into making it at least owned by the United States, even if it wasn't officially a state or even official territory.
Wow. Bit of a tangled political situation there, isn't it?
Quite.
Bit of a conflict of interest.
Less than you'd think. Because, sorry, now I'm being bad at the lightning round.
Yeah,
right?
Lance, you're terrible at this.
It is seen as a great irony that the same government who would not protect this religious group, right? They were burned out, and they asked the federal government time and time again to be protected, would not, right? Again, there was that whole Civil War thing starting to build, right? This was a slavery, anti-slavery thing going on. And so the federal government, not only because of the religious thing, but because of the political climate, wouldn't really touch it. And so, yeah, wouldn't be protected. They finally had to leave. And then the government comes and says, hey, help us come fight the war. And a lot of people see that as like you got a lot of nerve. Until you understand someone asked for it. Brigham Young. He asked the federal government to form a Mormon battalion. All those men fighting in the Mexican War, which, by the way, they never actually fought in any real battles. But they took all their wages and sent it back to their families. They financed the exodus with the Mormon battalion, as it was called.
Huh.
Yeah, it was seen as this big, how dare you ask us for help when you wouldn't protect us. It was requested by Brigham Young. This guy had all the chess pieces moving. Like I said, love him or hate him, you got to respect him, because that guy had all the things moving. He was 5 steps ahead all the time.
It's a bold move.
It was a very bold move.
To flee a country and then be like, hey, by the way, were you interested in stealing this country that we just they were already
in the middle of the Mexican-American War.
Okay, wow, there is more content, and there is still a whole 2 more stories that I didn't even touch.
Yep, I had more as well, but we're going to cut it off there. We've already gone nearly 45 minutes over time. We apologize if we took too much of your time. Join us next week. We are going to have Michael Brinkerhoff, the linguist, on for Tell Me a Story, and we're going to be talking about languages. Right? Obviously, anyone who has watched this channel for more than a day knows my intense love of language. And so we are going to bring on a bona fide linguist. And so very, very much looking forward to that. Join us next week. It'll be back on Thursday. So Thursday, 6:30 Mountain Standard Time. And then the week after that, Mike will be back for Story Stream. And we are going to be doing Crazy Writers.
Yeah.
Right? Writers tend to be a little bit crazy. We're going to be talking about some of the crazy writers in history. Some you might not see coming. So that'll be fun. Join us then. And as always, please remember to like and comment, but most of all, subscribe so you don't miss it. And of course, consider supporting us on Patreon so we can keep doing this. Thank you all, and good night.
Good night.
That was lots of fun.